This video is brought to you by Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan for a special offer and stay tuned after the video for more info. Hello everybody and welcome to my review of the first season of Agatha All Along, and I've got a lot to say about this show, so I'm going to just put the blanket warning up here right now. If you haven't seen the show yet, I'm going to jump right into spoilers, and there are a lot of twists and turns with this show. So if you're on the fence about whether you want to know or don't want to know what happened in the season, I would say watch the show, come back and watch this review. But if you've already seen the show or you don't care about knowing what happened, then go ahead, proceed with caution. So let's jump into my thoughts on the season overall. And before the show premiered, I felt about Agatha All Along very similarly to the way that I felt about Rogue One before it came out. This idea of like, okay, I mean, that's kind of cool, but like, did anybody really want this show, and who exactly is it for? But this was just another reminder for me that it's all about the execution and not necessarily about the concept. And that's why I may have thoughts about a show going in, but I try not to prejudge it before I watch it, because I actually thought that Agatha All Along was one of the best MCU TV shows that we've gotten so far. And when we look at the different tiers of shows, I would say at the top, in that top tier, we've got WandaVision, Loki, especially the first season, and then I would put Agatha All Along in that top tier ahead of a second tier where I would put shows like Hawkeye and Moon Knight and Miss Marvel. And then there's a pretty wide gulf between those tiers and most of the rest of the MCU as far as Disney Plus streaming shows go. And I think you could make an argument, and I'm going to lay out some of my thinking in this video, that Agatha All Along is maybe the most consistent, least uneven show that we've seen from Marvel on Disney Plus so far. After the first 2 episodes in my review here on the channel, I said that I was excited to see what the show had in store, but I honestly didn't expect to like it as much as I did. And I really think a lot of that credit goes to Jack Schaefer, who came back from doing WandaVision to do Agatha All Along. And a real key, if you look at both shows, I think to why they work so well, is that they're good at being TV shows, which not every MCU show or really every Disney Plus show is. Jack Schaefer understands how to map out and write a TV show that feels like a TV series. It can tell an overarching story, but each episode feels distinct. And if I were in charge of Marvel, which I very much am not, I would try to hire Jack Schaefer to be like the TV czar, to be a consultant on these other shows, because she shows a real understanding of how to execute a story in this format. Every episode of Agatha All Along felt like an episode of television, not 20 minutes of a movie chopped up. They all felt distinct from each other. This wasn't just one of the best MCU TV shows so far, quality-wise. It was also one of the best so far, form-wise. And I think that it really only underscores just how wrong they've gotten it on a lot of their other series. It also had something missing from a lot of MCU projects overall, which is stakes. Every time a member of the Coven died, I kept expecting the classic Marvel resurrection, but it didn't happen. And when I realized that dead characters would stay dead, I got way more invested in their stories. I guess you could argue that they did cheat when it comes to Agatha, but I also think her return as a ghost represents a fundamental change in her character and her relationship with Billy, so even that death has consequences. A big reason why the show worked goes to the cast, and obviously at the forefront of that is Kathryn Hahn. And what I think was great about the show is that, Agatha was fun in WandaVision, but this did what a spin-off show should do, which is to deepen and develop that character into her own person, not just a supporting character in somebody else's story. By the end of the show, we understand why Agatha's so evil. We sympathize with her, but they also don't completely defang that character. She's somebody that we don't mind rooting for going forward, but they don't undo a lot of what we've already seen. I really do hope that Kathryn Hahn gets some award consideration for this show, because she has to play so many different levels of Agatha. She has the sort of pretend Agatha who's caught in the spell at the very beginning of the show. Then we get the sort of wickedly funny Agatha towards the end of the season. We get a much more rounded, sad, grieving Agatha as we understand more about her past and everything that happened. And also, and I think this is an underrated part of her performance, Kathryn Hahn had to play so much of the season on 2 different levels, because once you understand what's going on, you have to be able to rewind back to the first couple of episodes and have it make sense.
The Witch's Road doesn't exist.
You're lying.
Am I?
And I went back and watched some of that. She really is playing the scenes in a way that makes sense the first time, but really makes sense the second time, and that's a very specific energy that you have to have.
Power doesn't interest me.
Keep telling yourself that.
The rest of the Coven was also really well cast. Deborah Jo Rupp is an actress that is just delightful on screen.
So who's going high?
Oh, no, thank you. I don't take drugs.
And my only issue is that she wasn't in the show more. I mean, on a story level, it makes sense that the only person who isn't really a witch would die first. But I expected the show to do what probably most other shows would have done, which is to reveal that she was really this super witch all along, and then she untaps this hidden power, etc. No, she's just kind of this poor soul that got taken along for the ride by Agatha, which again underscores the fact that Agatha doesn't really care about anybody else, but also sets things up like the dark running joke that Agatha cared so little about her that she couldn't even remember her name.
Sharon's dead.
Who's Sharon?
One of the advantages of doing an episodic TV show right is that if you can focus on a character for one episode, then even if we don't get a whole lot of time with that character, we feel like we understand who they are. And I think the best example of that in this season is Alice, who is played by Ali Ahn, because she got the spotlight in the episode where they're all forming the band. I felt like I got to know her and why she was along for the ride, what she wanted. And I think it's somewhat tragic that I don't think she ever could have gotten what she was looking for. But when you're killing characters like this show does, it can feel sometimes like some of them were meaningless or some of them were placeholders. But the structure of the show and the fact that each little trial gives you a focus on an individual witch made me feel like, okay, well, you know, she's gone a little bit early, but I understand her. And I feel like she had a reason and a purpose for being in the show. And that comes down to smart writing. Also, tying her story into the Ballad of the Witches Road, I think kept part of Alice alive for the rest of the series. And one side note, I know in that episode that the song was sort of a 70s style ballad, but watching a coven of witches fight off a demon inside of a studio consumed by fire is one of the most metal things I've ever seen. One of my favorite characters was Lilia, who was played by Patti LuPone. And again, this is somebody who you think you sort of know in the first part of the season. She's just this kooky witch. She's losing it a little bit. And then when she gets her spotlight episode, you understand what's really going on with her. You recontextualize the whole series. And I liked this idea that she's jumping through time. She's living her life out of order. So she's able to sort of give meaning from later in her life to moments that come earlier in her life. And we can go back and rewind and watch it. And that's actually kind of one of the brilliant things about the series, not just from a creative level, but from a Marvel financial minutes viewed level, is when you have a show that rewards a second viewing, that's just more watch time for people to go back and watch the series again, which in an industry that's ruled by watch time is a nice little thing for your show to have. Patti LuPone was perfect for the role of Lilia, and the casting in general, I think, really seemed focused on finding the right actors for these roles instead of casting the flashiest names. And before the Broadway people come after me, let me just say Patti LuPone is an acting legend, but not necessarily in the circles that the MCU is typically marketing toward. Honestly, I think removing the burden of the $200 million budget on this show gave the casting directors a little more leeway to go out there and find who they thought would play the role best, and not necessarily the person who is focus grouped and market tested because they've got to get the ROI back because the Q1. That's the problem with those $200 million budgets. You maybe can't be as risky or even do the things you want to do as much, whereas Agatha All Along had more of that freedom. Sasheer Zamata is somebody that I was familiar with from her years on SNL, but she really surprised me with the depth of her dramatic acting as Jen, who's kind of the only one who walks away from this whole thing unscathed. She's restored to power. She's off to live her best life. I'm sort of split on her character because I kind of hope we don't see her again, that she gets that happy ending and just flies off into the sunset. But I wouldn't mind more of Sasheer Zamata in the MCU if they decide to bring her character into whatever the future iteration of the show is going to be, if any. But overall, I think the character on the page, combined with Zamata's performance, was a perfect mix of comedy and drama.
You said this might happen, but you're being extra wispy.
Wispy?
Kooky.
Of course, I've got to mention Aubrey Plaza, who is one of my favorite actors to watch. And I wish that we had more of her in the show, but she's very in demand. And I'm sure they only had a small window that they could shoot with her. And I think that's why Rio/Death is so in and out with the adventures, but that kind of suits the character. She made the most of her screen time though, and I love that she got to go full cackling witch at the end of the series. Now, I'm sure a lot of hardcore fans probably want to focus on some sort of Thanos connection, since the comic book version of Death was such a key player in the Infinity Gauntlet story, but I liked how they built her story in connection with this show, with Agatha, because that's really what's important to the execution of this show, and I'd be surprised, honestly, if they decide to use her in the broader MCU. And their relationship is smartly written because, again, you think for most of the season that Agatha made some sort of malicious deal with Death, that she traded her son for the Darkhold, and that's what all the other witches think.
Did you know she traded her own child for the Book of the Damned?
Then you find out that there was no deal, that Agatha's just pissed off with Death because Death took her son away from her, even though Death had given her extra time. And that's sort of a recurring theme on the show, is you think that there's all of these complex things going on and rules and mythology, but it's actually a lot more simple than that and a lot more human. Instead of the convoluted, contrived stuff that a lot of the other shows get into, it's really kind of the simplest explanation. Generally, every time I thought the show was gonna do something that fell more into comic book movie TV show convention, it actually took a turn and did something that was surprising and more meaningful. And the Rio-Agatha relationship was one of those things. I'm not really focused on her role in the overall MCU, and I think that that's a credit to this show. There's so many shows that Marvel's made that seem solely focused on setting up whatever's next, and this show was focused on establishing the relationship between these characters and telling this story. That seems like TV 101, but it's actually more and more rare these days.
I loved someone, and I had to do something that I did not want to do, even though it was my job.
Finally, we have Joe Locke as Teen, who was later revealed to be Billy Maximoff. I said in my first review that he was the co-lead in Heartbreaker. It is Heartstopper. Trust me, I heard about that one. I liked the solve on his character as far as how Billy got into the real world, and I think it was another example of the show anticipating fan questions and coming up with a satisfying resolution, because it makes sense. The idea that Billy was a consciousness that was in Wanda's hex and was able to escape that and inhabit the body of somebody, of a dying teenager, who then becomes Billy, it again doesn't stretch credulity. And listen, you don't have to give me a necessarily realistic scenario. If you just give me something that's thought out, then I'm okay with it. And it felt like writers actually spent some time thinking about this instead of doing, again, what you see on so many other shows, which is going like, I don't know, whatever, something happened. I actually like that we see Wanda's strengths and weaknesses in Billy, and he feels like somebody who's gone through all of these things in his life and is really trying to find his own way forward without falling into the same pitfalls that took both of his parents away. And isn't that really kind of what most people are trying to do, to learn from what's happened before and then to chart your own path and maybe do it just a little bit better? I was actually glad in retrospect that I don't frequent the forums and social media and subreddits that are always speculating about what's going to happen in the show or leaking what's going to happen in the show, because when I went back and looked, a lot of them were saying from early on, oh yeah, that's going to be Billy, he's Wiccan, this is, you know, what he's going to come in and this is the role he's going to play. And I think that takes a lot of fun out of the show. It's why I don't intentionally seek out that sort of information. And I thought that the reveal of that was done really well, with the appearance of the crown on Billy's head and then the smash cut to the credits of Billie Eilish's You Should See Me in a Crown. And generally, I thought that the music department on the show, apart from the original music that was composed for the show, did a really good job of finding great songs for that cut to credits that fit with the show, that kind of left you excited for the next episode. And I think it's another example of how different departments inside of the production of a show can all come together to try to make the best whole. The next big reveal is that the Witch's Road isn't real and that it was a construct that Billy unintentionally made. I liked the usual suspects-like way that this was revealed, and it makes perfect sense given who his mother is, and really, again, recontextualizes every interaction Agatha has with him through the whole show, because she knew from the very beginning. And the show showed once again that they have people in the writer's room that are actually anticipating what the fans at home may be thinking, because after that big reveal, I'm like, well, wait, people died on the road, and then Billy immediately starts feeling guilt.
My mind killed them.
Don't give yourself too much credit.
And the show takes a minute to let him address those feelings. It becomes sort of a part of his journey. But at the same time, with the counter reveal regarding Agatha, it diffuses that issue because we also find out that the Witch's Road was something that Agatha herself invented, that it was never real, and that it was basically a con so that she could lure covens together to build the Witch's Road or summon the Witch's Road. And when they couldn't do it, she would provoke them into attacking her to steal their power and kill all of them. Those two story elements worked so well together because Agatha could then sort of diffuse Billy's guilt by saying, well, don't feel too bad because if you hadn't built the road, I would have killed everybody. So technically, you saved lives. I thought that was a good way to write yourself out of that situation. And then on top of it all, we learned in the flashback episode that the Ballad of the Witch's Road was a song that Agatha wrote with her son. And so now you add into that mix that this song is used to help summon the road. It's really a song that Agatha has now poured all of her grief and anger and rage into. It was something that at one time was a very special thing to her because of her love for her son. Now it's a very sad and tragic and angry thing for her. And it's just layering and layering and layering. And it makes the story feel complete. It makes the show feel thought out. And it makes it all satisfying, or at least it did for me. Lilia actually nailed in the moment what Agatha's true intentions were back in the second episode of the series.
This is a power grab. She wants us to attack her. What? You brought us here hoping our proximity, coupled with your cruelty, would get you a spark you could steal.
And what I like about the twist here is that it does change the game, but it doesn't diffuse the evilness in Agatha. It underscores it. And I like that the show didn't feel the need to take her and turn her into an all-around good guy, because that's another thing that I was expecting. Let's take this evil character from the MCU, and then over the course of the show, she's going to discover that she's got a heart of gold and that she was really misunderstood and that she was good all along. And so now she's going to be somebody we love, and let's just forget about all the terrible stuff. This show's not interested in that. It contextualizes everything, and you understand how she got to where she is, but it's not interested in making us forgive Agatha. It just gives us an Agatha at the end of the series that's entered a new phase of her life. And I loved the idea when Billy was trying to banish her to the afterlife that she's saying, no, I'm not ready to go because I can't face my son, because she understands all of the things that she's done since he died. And that gives Agatha herself a road to keep walking as a character. So many times the show or the movie that we're watching says, okay, well, from the beginning to the end, we've got to come all the way around on this character. And again, that's not what this show wants to do. It's so much more well thought out and constructed than 90%, I think, of what we've seen, not just from MCU shows on Disney, but from Disney shows across all of their different properties. And I think that sort of meticulous planning of the series even shows in how they structured these episodes, because I think most shows would have given you the Agatha flashback a lot earlier, mainly because they might have been trying to do that 180-degree character switch. But Agatha All Along saves it until last because that's when the story requires the audience to know that information. Instead of doing a rushed one-season Agatha redemption arc, this was a season that lets us get to know this character and what's happened in her life. And from this point on, we can then perhaps understand or accept as an audience that she's going to try to redeem herself because we fully understand her. They're not trying to go from A to B all at once. They're just jumping around to different points in the trail. And it's just another example of that old Roger Ebert quote about it's not what it's about, it's how it's about it. You can do a redemption arc, but you've got to do it right. And I think that this show is attempting to do it right. Really, I think this season had everything you'd want from a good season of MCU TV. It had humor, it had drama, it had an intriguing plot full of red herrings and reveals that actually make sense. There's character growth. We had a progression of storylines for characters we knew, including really Wanda through Billy. And there's even a little bit of broader world building and some teases that we may see Wanda again sometime in the future.
Is Wanda Maximoff really dead?
Yes. No. Maybe.
And really, it all comes back to what I've said so many times about the key to making a good movie or making a good TV show, which is that it's about story, story, story. Because when you look at what Disney has done across all of their TV franchises, they've brought back popular characters like Boba Fett. They've revised franchises like Willow. They've brought in big name characters like She-Hulk. They've tried to adapt big storylines like Secret Invasion. And yet, I think that Agatha All Along is a demonstrably better show than all of those. This is a TV show that's about a supporting character that most people hadn't heard of before WandaVision outside of the comic book circles. It stars a cast who are popular in their own pockets of the entertainment industry, but aren't the A-list marquee stars that have been recruited for other shows. And this was a show that was also brought in at a budget of reportedly less than $40 million. And I think has done more goodwill for the MCU than 2 or 3 of their other shows probably put together. There's an old William Goldman quote about Hollywood that's making the rounds for decades that says nobody knows anything. And to an extent that's true, because nobody does really know what's going to be a hit and what's going to be a flop. But I would amend that a little bit to say that while you don't know what the reception is going to be, I think generally if you hire good writers, if you hire good actors, if you hire people to run your TV shows who actually care about the story and the show itself and aren't just recruited because they're a hot name or a buzzy name or they wrote something else that's popular and you want to just grab them as soon as possible. If you hire all of those people, people that understand why you're telling this story other than just supporting a billion-dollar machine behind it, then I think that generally you're going to make a pretty good show, and hopefully the quality of that show will entice people to watch. It really does seem simple, which is why I feel like banging my head against the wall when I've reviewed so many of these shows over the years, because it's been proven time and time again how you make a great show, and so many of the studios just seem to flaunt those rules and just say like, no, we're going to try it this way, a way that largely hasn't worked. And the optimist in me is hoping that maybe this is a turn the corner moment for Marvel where they realize, okay, you know what? We need to refocus, go back to basics. Remember, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was largely built on maybe less known or less popular characters, at least in part, that were made popular by creators and directors and writers who loved those characters and through their passion made the audience love them. And that's what I think Agatha All Along does here, because I'm now invested in this character and invested in Billy and the other people in the show that I never even heard of, because the show and the story were so well written, way more than I'm invested in MODOK or Kang or even some of the A-list quote unquote Avengers. I'd like to think this maybe signals the end of the era where Marvel would just throw $200 million at a marquee character or a known storyline and assume that people would like it, even if nobody really has an idea about what to do with that character or that storyline. That would be nice, but the realist in me is worried that that could be a witch's road to nowhere as far as my hopes and dreams for the future. Still, you can always hope, and I think that Agatha All Along is a step in the right direction. I just hope it's not 2 steps forward, 3 steps back when it comes to the MCU. I'm just going to be thankful for the season and the story that we got, and I have to give praise to the cast, the writers, and especially Jack Schaefer, who reportedly kept including Agatha in so many of her pitches that Kevin Feige just told her to go make an Agatha show. Let's see more of that. Let's see more passion. Let's see more creators that are brought in to make stories about characters that they love and trust in the part of Kevin Feige and the MCU that they can translate that love to a broader audience. So when we talk about Agatha All Along, in general, I was a doubter going in, but I really liked this show, and I'm going to give it a See It Now rating because I really do think that this is one of the best MCU TV shows, and honestly, I think this is what an MCU TV show should be. It should be this thought out. It should have this kind of love for its characters, and I am hoping that when people come in the future to make MCU TV shows, that people point to this one as a template for what you should be doing, because we've had a whole lot of other ones that you can point to as examples of what you shouldn't do. So those are my thoughts on Agatha All Along. What do you think? Did you like it as much as I did? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I'm going to thank the sponsor for this video, Miracle Made. It's the scariest week of the year, so I'm going to tell you something absolutely terrifying. Did you know that traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat? I sure didn't, and I don't really like the idea of sleeping on a toilet seat. I mean, I haven't done that since at least college, and that one time in 2009 that someone brought me an original Formula 4 Loco for my birthday. True story. But you don't have to worry about having a toilet bed with Miracle Made. Their sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, which means they're not just cleaner, they stay fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. And you're going to want to keep these sheets on your bed because they're also incredibly soft and comfortable, and their silver-infused fabric is also temperature regulating to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter what the weather is. So to me, the choice is clear. A sleepless night trying to unlearn what I just told you, or night after night of great sleep under your new Miracle Made sheets. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan to try Miracle Made sheets today, and whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use the promo code Dan at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle's so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a free refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan and use the code Dan to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Dan to treat yourself. Thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring this episode. Thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching. Be sure to stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.